At 54, after another draining date that ended in surface-level conversation and mutual disinterest, I sat in my car and asked a question I should have asked 20 years ago. What am I really looking for? And is this process helping me get there or keeping me stuck? That was the moment I stopped dating, and ironically, it was also the moment I found peace. Dating in today's world feels like opening 17 tabs on your computer, all playing different noise, none offering real signal. There's too much swiping, not enough substance, too much effort chasing possibilities, and very little energy left for real, meaningful growth. I didn't stop dating because I gave up on love. I stopped because I stopped outsourcing my peace to the unpredictable behavior of strangers. At 54, something clicked. I didn't crash. I didn't burn. I didn't have some dramatic heartbreak or sudden betrayal. In fact, it was quite the opposite. It was the absence of emotion that hit hardest. I was sitting across the table from someone I had matched with online. She was intelligent, charming, well put together. By all accounts, this was a good match. But halfway through our conversation, I realized something chilling. I wasn't present, not emotionally, not mentally. I was performing, saying the right things, smiling on cue, laughing politely, thinking about whether I wanted to split dessert, not because I wanted it, but because it might extend the date. That's when it hit me. I wasn't dating to connect. I was dating to keep myself distracted. Distracted from what? From the questions I hadn't answered. Who am I now, at 54, without the noise, without the chase, the games, the performances, the tiny dopamine spikes of interest and attention? Who am I when I stop trying to be chosen and simply choose myself? Dating becomes a loop, not a ladder. Dating had turned into a loop. Same apps, same questions, same surface-level chemistry that fizzled within days. I realized I was moving but not progressing. It was like running in a digital hamster wheel powered by short-term validation and long-term emptiness. I wasn't growing. I wasn't evolving. I was buffering. Think about it like software. If you're constantly updating the UI without touching the source code, you're not making progress. You're putting a new skin on the same system. That's what dating felt like. Cosmetic iteration instead of core upgrade. So I pulled the plug. Peace requires a system reset. The moment I decided to stop dating wasn't emotional. It was strategic. I treated it like a system reset. If an algorithm isn't producing the results you need, you don't keep tweaking. You shut it down, run diagnostics, and rebuild. So I rebuilt. I stopped responding to hey. I uninstalled apps. I canceled setups. I gave up late night scrolling and empty texting, and I replaced all of it with silence. That silence, it terrified me at first, but soon it became my most powerful feedback loop. It gave me clarity on what I needed, peace, purpose, direction, and just how much I had traded away trying to feel wanted. The mirror I had avoided for years. When you stop dating, you're left with yourself. And if you've been avoiding yourself by staying busy with people, it's uncomfortable. But discomfort is the first sign of honest reflection. I asked myself, am I looking for a partner or avoiding solitude? Do I actually want love, or do I just want someone to interrupt my boredom? What if the next decade of my life wasn't about finding the one, but becoming the person I was always meant to be? These weren't romantic questions. These were engineering questions, problem-solving questions. They required logic, optimization, clarity. I realized I wasn't broken. I was misdirected. I had invested decades of attention outward, on profiles, faces, and first impressions, when the upgrade I needed was internal. Conclusion: dating wasn't the problem, my operating system was. There's nothing wrong with dating. The problem is dating without intention, and doing it when your inner framework isn't calibrated. I stopped dating at 54, not because I lost faith in people, but because I needed to rebuild faith in stillness, in purpose, in peace, because sometimes walking away from the noise is the most powerful way to hear the signal. When I stopped dating, people thought I had given up, but in reality, I had shifted my investment strategy. Dating, for most of us, is an emotional economy. We trade time, attention, energy, and often our boundaries for the chance of affection, intimacy, or even just companionship. But rarely do we ask, what am I really getting back? What is the return on this emotional investment? At 54, I started asking that question. And when I zoomed out, when I reviewed the date, not just from my own experiences, but from years of watching others, I came to a clear conclusion. Romantic attention gave short-term spikes, but peace gave long-term growth. Love can be expensive. Peace pays dividends. Let's look at this in practical terms. In dating, you're spending on time, conversations, meetups, texting, overthinking money, dinners, drinks, gifts, travel, mental bandwidth, constant analysis. Did they mean this? Should I have said that? Emotional risk, vulnerability, rejection, confusion. Now compare that to peace, time, reclaimed money, reinvested into health, hobbies, or purpose, focus, sharpened energy, contained and redirected emotional risk. Minimized dating gave me moments of joy followed by days of uncertainty. Peace gave me consistency, a baseline of clarity, a new operating rhythm that I could count on. I wasn't outsourcing my emotional stability anymore. I was engineering it. Peace is not boring, it's scalable. A lot of people avoid peace because they confuse it with boredom. We've been conditioned to equate chaos with romance. The highs and lows, the drama, the chase, the miscommunication, the what did that text mean, cycle. All of that becomes normalized, addictive even. But what happens when you remove the chaos? At first, it feels like nothing is happening, but then everything starts happening. Internally, you hear your own thoughts. You identify your patterns. You develop systems that make your life easier instead of more dramatic. You build routines that aren't constantly disrupted by other people's energy. You become accountable only to yourself. In that space, I started waking up earlier. My sleep improved. My work improved. I read more. I walked more. My diet got cleaner. My thinking got sharper, and interestingly, so did my boundaries. I wasn't constantly drained. I wasn't constantly over-explaining. I had energy in reserve, and that's where creativity thrives. Peace makes you magnetic to the right people. Here's the irony. The moment I stopped chasing attention, I started attracting alignment. The people I began connecting with through work, through passion, through shared purpose, weren't trying to fill a romantic void. They were building lives like me. They had depth, clarity, and vision. And our conversations had weight. Peace doesn't just protect your time. It recalibrates your frequency. You stop tolerating noise. You start attracting harmony. When you prioritize peace, you raise the price of admission. I stopped dating, but I didn't stop loving life. In fact, I started loving it more, because no one had access to disturb it unless they matched the peace I had worked to build. Romance used to be a goal. Now it's a bonus, only welcomed if it adds value without compromising the structure I've created. That's not cynicism, that's emotional maturity. I'm not afraid of love. I just no longer reward chaos with access. Final thought, stop measuring love in attention, start measuring it in alignment. Peace gave me more than dating ever could. It gave me time to think, space to heal, energy to build, and the greatest ROI of all, a relationship with myself that no one can take away. I didn't stop dating because I gave up. I stopped because I finally understood what real value looks like. And once you feel peace, you'll never negotiate with noise again. One of the most common assumptions people make when they hear I stopped dating at 54 is this: aren't you lonely? It's always the first question. It's also the wrong one, because what they're really asking is, how do you survive without someone there to fill the silence? But here's what they don't realize. Asterisk asterisk, the silence is not the enemy, asterisk asterisk, it's the mirror. And what I found when I stared into that mirror wasn't loneliness, it was truth. Loneliness isn't solitude, it's disconnection from yourself. Most people fear being alone because they associate it with abandonment, with being forgotten, with being unloved. But that's not what solitude is. That's not what I live with. Solitude is the intentional choice to return to your own company, and that company, it becomes stronger, clearer, and more peaceful the more you invest in it. On the other hand, true loneliness isn't the absence of others. It's being surrounded by people who don't see you, don't get you, don't know how to hold space for who you really are. I've felt lonelier in relationships than I ever have in silence. Think about that. You can be lying next to someone every night and still feel completely invisible. You can share a bed, a dinner table, a last name, and still feel unheard. That's not love, that's a performance. And for years, I performed. Society sells fear of being alone, but peace is bought in solitude. There's a multi-billion-dollar industry built on our fear of solitude. Dapps, shows, social platforms, romantic comedies, all reinforcing the idea that being alone is a problem that must be fixed. But when I stopped dating and stepped away from all that noise, I realized the exact opposite. Solitude isn't a problem, it's a power source. It gives you data about who you are when no one is watching, about how you process, about how you recover, about what actually gives you joy. It strips away the need to perform, to impress, to adjust. And what remains is something rare: authenticity. Alone doesn't mean incomplete. One of the deepest lies we've inherited is the belief that we are not whole until someone else chooses us. That kind of programming is dangerous. It makes people settle. It leads people to stay in relationships where love is conditional, energy is drained, and identity is lost. I don't believe in my other half. I believe in two whole people, each rooted in themselves, coming together when it makes both of them stronger. I'm not half of anything, I'm whole, and peace is what allowed me to see that. Rewriting the internal dialogue when you're alone long enough, something powerful starts to happen. Your internal dialogue improves. You stop telling yourself stories like, "You need someone to feel validated," "You're running out of time," "You're hard to love." And instead, your mind becomes quieter, more precise, more intentional. You begin to ask different questions. What am I building? Who do I want to become? What kind of energy am I willing to let into my life? You stop chasing people who aren't chasing themselves. And suddenly, solitude becomes a strategy, not a sentence. The real freedom, choosing silence without fear. I no longer fear the quiet. I welcome it. I no longer fill space just to avoid discomfort. I build in that space. Whether I'm walking alone, eating alone, traveling alone, I am not lonely. I am fully present. When you start treating your own presence like it's enough, you no longer beg for crumbs of attention from anyone else. And from that position of wholeness, if love arrives, it's welcomed, but it is never required. Final thought: loneliness isn't the absence of a partner. It's the absence of inner peace. I don't date because I'm afraid of being alone. I stopped dating because I'm no longer afraid of being with myself. And the most liberating realization of all, I never needed someone to complete me. I only needed space to remember that I was already whole. When I stopped dating, I realized something I had been unwilling to admit for decades. I wasn't really looking for love. I was looking for validation. It sounds harsh, but if you're honest with yourself, you might recognize it too. That subtle high when someone texts you back, the rush when someone calls you attractive, the micro dose of dopamine when you match with a stranger online, the sense of worth that seems to rise and fall based on whether you're being chosen. That's not love, that's external validation, and it's one of the most addictive currencies in the modern world. I was outsourcing my self-worth for years. I was feeding on attention and calling it connection. If someone liked me, I liked myself more. If someone ghosted me, I questioned everything about my value. If someone complimented me, I felt worthy. If not, I felt invisible. It was an emotional algorithm I didn't even know I was trapped in. Give energy, receive validation, feel momentarily important, repeat. But the ROI was broken because validation is like sugar. It gives you energy, but no nutrition. You need more and more to feel the same hit, and eventually it makes you sick. At 54, I had enough data. I looked at my patterns. I traced the decisions I made to be liked, to be accepted, to be wanted. And then I asked a question that changed everything. What if I never needed to be chosen? What if I just needed to choose myself? Deeply, fully, permanently, attention is cheap. Self-respect is expensive. In today's world, attention is abundant, but genuine self-respect is rare. You can get attention by wearing something revealing, saying something clever, or posting something curated. But you cannot buy self-worth with that currency. I had to reprogram my brain. Instead of checking if someone had texted me back, I started checking in with myself. Did I follow through on what I said I'd do today? Did I honor my energy, my body, my mind? Did I show up with integrity in my own life, even when no one was watching? And slowly, the system started rewiring. Validation feels good, but alignment feels better. One of the biggest traps in dating is this. We confuse chemistry with compatibility and attention with alignment. But validation is a short game. It feeds your ego but starves your soul. Alignment is a long game. It might be slower, it might be quieter, but it builds something solid. It brings people into your life who respect your time, your values, your peace. Once I let go of seeking validation, I started attracting different conversations. Not what are you looking for, but what are you building? Not do you want to hang out, but how can we grow something meaningful? People sensed that I didn't need them to complete me, and that made every connection more honest. I'm not anti-love, I'm anti-dependence. Let me be clear, I'm not against love. I'm against the idea that love is something you must earn through performance. The healthiest love doesn't require you to prove yourself. It recognizes your worth because you already know it. And when you stop chasing validation, you stop tolerating people who only love the version of you they can shape, manipulate, or control. You walk away faster, you ask better questions, you trust your instincts, you stop begging to be seen and start requiring it. Final thought, yourself. Worth shouldn't be a subscription. I used to need others to remind me of my value. Now I wake up knowing it, and that's not arrogance, that's clarity. You are not a service other people get to rate. You are not a profile to be swiped on. You are not a resume of traits hoping to be hired for love. You are a complete system, And when you validate yourself from within, you never have to audition for someone else's approval again. One of the most underrated benefits of stepping away from dating, you get your energy back. Not just emotional energy, but mental bandwidth, time, focus, and drive. The kind of drive that doesn't come from being inspired by a partner or trying to impress someone. It comes from you finally having space to build. And once I stopped chasing connection, I started creating momentum. Dating consumed more than just time. Most people assume dating only costs time. A dinner here, a few hours there, but it's far more than that. Every new connection required mental space. Thinking what to say, rereading texts, decoding tone. It cost emotional stability, uncertainty, emotional swings, false starts, hopes raised, then dropped. It cost physical health, late nights, disrupted routines, missed workouts, comfort food after rejections. It even cost professional performance, because distraction doesn't clock out when you enter the workplace. I realized I was bleeding energy in a dozen directions, and for what? To maybe find a spark that could lead to something, or maybe just another cycle of exhaustion. That's when the shift happened. I chose to reinvest in myself like a startup. I've always treated ideas like assets. And when something stops producing returns, it's not emotional. It's data. You pivot. So I applied that same model to my life. I reallocated everything I used to spend on dating, mental effort, emotional effort, even money, into 3 core verticals. Purpose, health, creation. The results were measurable, fast, and deeply satisfying. Purpose, the engine behind peace without the noise of dating. My calendar opened up. Suddenly, I wasn't spending nights scrolling through conversations that led nowhere. I was journaling, reflecting, designing. I got obsessed with clarity, what I wanted, where I was headed, what legacy I wanted to leave behind. I became more intentional about my time, more focused in my projects, more present in my mission. Purpose became my new partner. It challenged me, demanded more from me, but also gave back tenfold. And in that process, I stopped being distracted by who might join my journey and started building something they'd want to earn a place in. Health, no longer an afterthought when dating is a priority. Everything else gets pushed aside. You stay up late texting. You skip workouts for dinners. You eat emotionally after a rejection. You drink more than you should because the date felt awkward, and alcohol made it tolerable. But when I cut dating out of the picture, I re-engineered my health. I started sleeping with intention. I began eating for fuel, not emotion. I built routines instead of reacting to someone else's unpredictability. I moved every day, walked, lifted, stretched, because it made me feel good, not to look better for someone else. Your body is a system, and systems thrive on stability. Dating introduced chaos. Peace introduced optimization. Creation, building instead of impressing, this one surprised me most. Without the mental clutter of trying to impress strangers or decode mixed signals, I found my creativity surged. Ideas started flowing. Projects I'd postponed came back to life. Books were written. Designs were built. Conversations became deeper, because when you stop spending your energy to get noticed, you can spend it to get better. I wasn't trying to be impressive anymore. I was simply creating because I loved what I was building, and that made everything more meaningful. Final thought. Energy is your most valuable currency. Time is important. But energy is the multiplier. Where you put your energy defines your growth, your peace, your outcome. I used to invest that energy in unpredictable people. Now I invest it in predictable results. And that's not selfish. It's efficient. That's not bitter. It's strategic. That's not lonely. It's deeply, deeply fulfilling. So no, I didn't stop dating because I gave up. I stopped because I realized I can either try to get someone's attention or I can build something that commands it. I chose to build. Let me make something clear right away. I didn't stop dating because I stopped believing in love. I stopped dating because I stopped believing that love should cost me my peace, purpose, or personal growth. That's not giving up. That's leveling up. Because once you taste real peace, you stop negotiating with chaos. I used to think love meant sacrifice like many I was taught, directly or indirectly, that love means compromise. Be flexible, be available, be accommodating, shrink a little here, bend a little there, stay quiet, stay patient, stay hopeful. Eventually, all that bending becomes breaking. You give so much of yourself that you forget where you end and where the relationship begins. And when that happens, it's no longer love, it's emotional erosion. But love that costs your identity isn't love, it's dependency, and I decided to opt out of that. I set a new standard. Peace is non-negotiable. When I walked away from the dating game, it wasn't because I couldn't find someone. It was because I refused to lower my standards to be found. Too many people are chasing connection while abandoning themselves in the process. They accept being misunderstood, mistreated, or barely prioritized, all because they're afraid of being alone. But here's the thing, I'd rather be alone with peace than partnered with confusion. I'd rather build in silence than shrink in noise. I'd rather wait a decade for alignment than waste one more year on drama. That's not bitterness, that's maturity, love, reimagined. When I say I believe in love, I mean something very different now. I don't mean butterflies and fast chemistry. I don't mean intensity that burns bright for 3 weeks and vanishes at the first sign of conflict. I don't mean someone who keeps me guessing, checking my phone second, guessing my words. That version of love is emotionally expensive and energetically unstable. What I believe in now is compatibility, clarity, and calm. I believe in love that expands both people instead of draining one to uplift the other. I believe in love that feels like alignment, not adrenaline, and that kind of love doesn't show up often, but when it does, it doesn't need to be chased. It fits. It matches the life you've built instead of disrupting it. I stopped lowering my frequency to meet people where they were. There's a strange temptation in dating, to lower your standards just enough to keep someone interested, to become easier to love, to tolerate what you wouldn't in your solitude. But if you keep lowering your frequency to meet people where they are, you'll never experience the power of someone rising to meet you. When I stopped dating, I made a decision. If someone can't meet me at the level of peace, clarity, and intentional living I've built, then they simply don't qualify, not because I'm superior, but because I've done the inner work. And I'm not about to undo it for temporary attention. Final thought, love isn't gone. It's just more expensive now. I didn't close the door on love. I simply raised the entry requirements. Now love must respect my boundaries, add peace, not subtracted, align with my values and purpose, come without games, noise, or confusion, thrive in truth, not fantasy. If it meets those criteria, I'm open. But until then, I'm not waiting, I'm living, and the irony, the moment I made peace my priority, love stopped feeling like something I had to find. It became something I might one day welcome, but never chase again. So no, I didn't stop dating because I lost hope. I stopped because I finally understood what I'm truly worth, and I won't exchange that for anything less than extraordinary.